Hi, welcome to today's episode of We Are Marketing Happy, a healthcare marketing podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Bristow, and I'm also the CEO and founder at Hedy Hopp, a full service, fully healthcare marketing agency. I am so excited today to have our very own Miranda Ochsner with us. She is Hedy Hopp's Director of Paid Media, and we are here today to do our part two of our two-part series of talking about the shifting media landscape. So, Miranda, politics.
Oh,
Politics is not
Jenny.
something we want to talk about on a
No.
podcast. No. But as you're planning media for 2026, unfortunately, we always have to be thinking about outside forces that may impact our plans. And this year's midterms. So, give us an update, kind of what's happening and what should we be expecting?
Sure. So it's going to be a wild one, Jenny. So in 2024, from what we've collected from a total political ad spend rate that was presidential was over $10 billion. I believe the figure came in at like 10.53 plus billion. That is a lot of money. Like that is a ton of money for a presidential. As we're looking at midterms this year, the projection already is $10 billion, and that is just for midterm elections. So that's what I'm like, this is wild because what we were spent for a very big presidential election, if I might add, we're in midterms now, and it's going to be as much, if not more, when it's all said and done. So it's something we have to keep in mind because it's going to affect placements on TV. Are we doing local radio? Are we going to have to like pre-buy spots so we don't get preempted? What's it going to do to our CPMs, cost per points? All of those different pieces we have to keep in mind because it's really, really going to affect the video component of kind of the media landscape, as well as more of those local channels specific to, broadcast, TV, radio. I think a big thing that we just have to really like keep in mind as we're looking at this is it's going to start picking up here, right? Like we had just had an election yesterday in Illinois, and it's like, cool, here comes the next round of this, and it's only going to continue to pick up. And, each state's a little bit different. So truly understanding kind of what those fight weeks and what not look like, in the different states across the board. But there are certain periods of time where we're going to be like, we should not even look at this week because it's going to be so noisy in the market around politics. We do not want the message to get lost, or, hey, maybe let's scale back a little bit. We definitely want to make sure we're out there and whatnot. But at the end of the day, if we're running TV during the three busiest weeks leading up to a midterm, there's a good chance your spots might not run, or you might get preempted and run over midnight and ratings won't be good. So it's all of those different pieces we have to keep in mind as we're kind of looking at a media strategy and outlining that.
So, for our listeners, here at Hedy Hopp, we work with large multi-state health systems, and we do both traditional and digital buying. So, for those listeners that are only really familiar with digital, I think this is kind of a good educational for how traditional works. So, something that is very interesting for folks that are new to traditional is kind of the concept of being bumped. So
Yeah.
talk about that, right? You can have the most beautiful plan in the world put together and you can have everything out there and then the sky basically comes falling down, right? Like
Yeah,
talk to
it
us about what happens.
you can have the most beautifully built TV and radio plan, flighting among audiences is perfect, everything's perfect, right? And then political comes in and they get first right. So they can come in and buy up all of the inventory and we're booted. No matter if we plan 2 weeks in advance, 2 months in advance, a year in advance, they come in and we either have to pay what they're going to pay or pay over, but they always get that first right. So, for example, we were working on a campaign in Wisconsin for the presidential election last for TV, and they're like, the market, I believe it was Milwaukee. They're like, someone just came in and dropped $45 million in TV and radio, and we're having to bump X, Y, and Z. And we're like, what? What happened? What? That's a lot of money these last 2 weeks. But it's also like they have the money, they get the first right to do that. Especially when it comes to political season, all of that is prepaid because politicians have to come in. We don't have to prepay, thank goodness, but from a political stance, they have to come in and prepay. So they are buying up any and all inventory that they can on those local channels, which will either take our beautiful, perfect schedule that we put together and move us to different day parts potentially. So if we're buying morning news, right, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., and they come in and buy all of that inventory up, they could bump us to midday, they could bump us to evening news, or they could bump us to overnights, which we don't want to be on overnights. We want to be on the highly rated programs, right? So there's a few different ways to that we kind of combat that. Obviously, scaling back the TV or kind of looking at our day part mix, specifically on TV or radio. We know that drive times are going to be a little bit more competitive. So can we look at maybe midday or like a 7 to 8 slot? So really, truly understanding how to pull those levers, but also planning early. If we know that those weeks, for example, the peak weeks is what we call them, if they're going to be insanely higher, let's scale back those weeks and maybe front load a week or two prior so we don't get lost in the noise before it's a busy few weeks before the election itself.
And then for those that don't know, explain to our listeners what happens if you're bumped.
You're either bumped to a different slot or you just don't run at all, which is
and
not
then you
fun.
get Exactly. And then you get
Yes.
a credit or have to replace, and then you have to scramble to try to figure out where you're going to put the funds. So one of the things that I really love about the way that you and your team handle media planning during times like this is really having contingency planning in place where we really think about what other channels, maybe more high intent media we can purchase, other digital channels where we have more control
Yes.
over the placement, and making sure that we're perhaps pulling back on those more local spends for digital during that period and then going back in after the fact. So it really can kind of reduce that chaos. You're still likely going to see some chaos nowadays.
Yeah,
how big it has become.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the big players are local, right? Because you're wanting to stay local. But we've seen a shift in the last few elections of being a little bit more digital heavy, specifically on that video front, like online video, CTV. I believe they're projecting anywhere from a 20 to 50% increase in CPMs for some of our larger, more competitive markets for these midterms when it comes to CPMs and costs specifically for those video channels. So we always want to have this approach of we don't just want to put all of our eggs in one basket or just in certain channels. We really want to diversify our channels depending on what that goal looks like. So if we know video is important and we know video is a crucial, can we be looking at different social channels of how we're deploying it? Is it a younger audience? Like, if it's a split audience, right, of like a 25 to 40 and then a 45 plus, do we put the 45 plus more in Facebook side of Meta and then pull back on them on Instagram and vice versa between the audience split? So we're really kind of dissecting the different channels, the mixes, how we're utilizing the assets that we might potentially already have, but also really honing in on how do we prioritize those high intent, channels like paid search. Those are stable. Those are effective. Of course, bids are going to be a little bit higher, but the inventory is there because it's all about the demand of what people are searching and when they're searching.
Yep, absolutely. So from a budgeting perspective, you're likely going to get less than you would normally, but you will feel more confident that it's still going to run compared to TV or radio. Yes.
Quality. It's about the quality of the placement when we're really looking at it. I mean, we love to see spots out there and definitely maximizing our reach and frequency when it comes to those traditional channels. But if we have the opportunity to spend $1 or $2 more on a CPM or 50 cents more on a CPM, and we know that we're going to run and we're following our brand safety and we're not around those negative topics or conversations of all the outside noise, like that's where we want to be. And we're paying for that premium, but also it's a quality spot to hit the exact audience we want to hit.
Oh, I love it, Miranda. Thank you so much for coming in both last week and this week. It's really helpful to help our listeners keep their fingers on the pulse of what's happening when it comes to paid media.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
So for listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please share this episode with any of your colleagues that may find it valuable, especially if you have not yet accounted for political season in your media planning.
Plan
pause and
early, plan early.
way better than band-aiding after the fact. So
Yes.
start planning, especially like Miranda said, with those small local races that may be happening sooner rather than later if they aren't already. So share it, like, and subscribe. We drop new episodes usually every Friday. If you have any topic ideas of things you want us to cover, give us a holler on social media. We'd love to hear your ideas. We're always taking requests. So thank you so much for tuning in today to this episode of We Are Marketing Happy. We will see you again on a future episode. Cheers.